Good evening. Welcome to Victory News for Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021. I'm Greg Stevens, along with Mike Garofalo. Tim Fox is away this week. Thank you for tuning in to Victory today. Those of you that are watching on Dish Network, Channel 265, on DirecTV, Roku, Apple TV, Facebook. Those of you watching on over-the-air stations in Columbus, Ohio, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we're glad that you are with us. Make sure that you share this on Facebook, especially today. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Please subscribe. Let your friends and your family know about Victory News. Today with us, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Victory News contributor John Graves. They're going to be joining us to discuss the growing crisis on the U.S. southern border. Let's get right to it. Let's go to Mike Garofalo. Mike.
Greg, the first thing I want to mention is that we just heard that President Joe Biden will be holding his first news conference a week from Thursday. So on March 25th, Joe Biden's press secretary Jen Psaki announced it a short time ago. So we've all been wondering when Joe Biden's going to hold his first news conference. Well, we now know it is Thursday, March 25th in the afternoon. Well, speaking of Joe Biden, Joe Biden's administration and his policies toward immigration have created a full-blown crisis at the border. And for the people who live in the area, that is beginning to pose a real problem.
We're a very economically depressed community. We can barely afford to take care of the people that we have here in our community now. And as of the 2nd, Border Patrol advised us they're basically going to drop people off here and do sort of like this, and they're your problem. And we just do not have the ability to care for these people. And quite frankly, it's going to cost us tens of thousands of dollars a year to be able just to provide them with a bottle of water and a sandwich when they get dropped off, because they're not able to give us how many. They can't give us what the background on these people are. They can't tell us what their health issues are. I've got a lot of seniors and elders here in between Gila Bend and our San Lucie village that are very susceptible to COVID. And now you're going to drop people off here, and we haven't seen the outbreak that other areas in Arizona have seen, yet we're going to get punished for their choices.
That was Mayor Chris Riggs. His town of Gila Bend, like a lot of towns that are near our southern border, have essentially been annexed by the Biden administration as designated sites for the release of immigrants heading into the country. During his interview, Riggs later added that he has seen an uptick in foot traffic through the area that appears to include a sizable number of persons acting as drug mules. Well, some immigrant teenagers apprehended trying to cross into the United States will not be staying close to the border. The federal government's plan is to house as many as 3,000 of them at a convention center in downtown Dallas. Those staying there will be boys aged 15 to 17. The massive surge of migrants at the border has stressed the immigration system. More than 100,000 illegals were picked up trying to cross the border in February alone. The K. Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center will be used for as many as 90 days beginning this week. FEMA and the Department of Health and Human Services will be responsible for caring for those children. Meantime, a facility made up of tents is being operated by the Border Patrol some 500 miles south of Dallas, currently housing more than 1,000 children and teenagers. And a high-speed chase and then a horrific crash left 6 illegal immigrants dead. It happened on Monday in the border county of Valverde off of Highway 277. Border Patrol arrested the driver after he tried to get away on foot. This is not the first time something like this has happened. 2 weeks ago in California, 13 people were killed when their packed SUV collided with a tractor trailer. Most, if not all, were illegal immigrants who paid $10,000 each to get into the U.S. And of the thousands of people rushing to try to cross the U.S. border, the concern is some are not just Central American migrants, but rather possible terrorists. Here is some of what was said after a group of Republican congressmen toured the border yesterday.
People they've caught in the last few days over there in Sector 3 or Monument 3 have been on the terror watch list. Individuals that they have on the watch list for terrorism are now starting to exploit the southern border. We need to wake up. We need to understand, listen, Mr. President Biden, you're an okay guy. Why don't you just admit you made a mistake with this policy and go back to the way it was and keep America safe for all of us?
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was also among the Republicans who came out to find out what was really going on at the border.
The security of our nation and our border is first and foremost the responsibility of our president. I came down here because I heard of the crisis. It's more than a crisis. This is a human heartbreak. The sad part about all of this, it didn't have to happen. This crisis is created by the presidential policies of this new administration. There's no other way to claim it than a Biden border crisis. We went through a new facility that was built just more than a year ago. They built it with a capacity they thought they could never meet, 1,040 people to be processed. Today broke that record. Today they're beyond capacity. They're having to build into the parking lot a makeshift facility. Even though the U.S. Congress just passed a $1.9 trillion bill, not $1 in there to help them. It's taking away the operation cost for the border to be protected. But for all these children that are unaccompanied that's sitting in there, there's 120 border agents that are now inside that unit that are not on the border protecting us.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy talking about what he and these other Republican congressmen who came to the border yesterday saw firsthand. Greg, back to you.
Thanks, Mike. It's very troubling. Joining us now is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Attorney General Paxton, welcome. Thank you for coming on Victory News with us. We interviewed last week Sheriff Mark Daniels of Cochise County, Arizona. He said this exact same thing. Border agents are no longer on the border. They're making runs to Costco to get things for people that are coming in. We have 3,000 teenage boys aged 15 to 17 with basically no work history, don't know where they are in school, coming in, and they're going to stay in Dallas. How does Texas absorb this?
Well, we can't. I mean, this is going to create tremendous economic costs to our state for education, healthcare, law enforcement. But really, even bigger than that is just the health risk associated with this, the fact that COVID is still out there. We've been very restrictive in this country. The Biden administration has been very restrictive with COVID, but apparently not when it relates to those coming across the border. The restrictions don't apply, which creates all kinds of risks for our state. And we also have the cost of higher crime rates, the human trafficking and the drug trafficking, and the fact that, I have met with families that have lost loved ones as a result of crime along the border and the influx of illegal immigrants. And so those are just costs you can never really measure. You just know that they're out there, and that as the Biden administration opens the borders and invites people in, it's going to be a problem for my state, and it's going to spread.
Yeah, as I was talking with the sheriff last week, we had our reporter Mike Garofalo was down on the Del Rio, Texas last week as well. I want to show you a picture that the sheriff there in Arizona sent us. This picture, there's the wall that didn't get finished, but the next picture, if you would please, this man right here, he's carrying what we would call an assault weapon, but he's not one of our agents. That is a cartel member inside the United States of America with weapons, and he's not the first one they've run into. It's not just a humanitarian crisis, but it's a security crisis as well, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a disaster, and we're going to see more and more incidences of this as the cartel gets more and more organized along our border, because they can, and it's easy. As you said earlier, a lot of these border agents are being taken off their normal duty. They're not being encouraged to actually keep people out. And because of the invitation to bring people in, it makes it easier to get other people in. And so we are definitely going to see an increase in crime, and the cost to the state is going to be really immeasurable.
Okay, I want to make a pivot here. I want to bring you back very quickly, but it looks like election fraud allegations may get a second look in Georgia. A Superior Court judge on Monday said he was inclined to unseal the ballots to allow them to be inspected by a poll watcher who questioned the results. Garland Favoritio was monitoring results on the Georgia Secretary of State's website when he sensed the numbers didn't look right. As a result, a lawsuit filed in Fulton County Superior Court alleges that fraudulent ballots were cast during November 3rd, 2020 election amid other alleged irregularities and as workers counted votes at Atlanta's State Farm Arena on election night. And we just got this confirmation from Georgia Star News breaking. The judge is now not considering it. The judge is going to do it. he's going to have a review of this. So 2 months after Washington Post reported about President Donald Trump's call with elections investigators in Georgia, the paper has had to issue a retraction. It had reported in January that when President Trump had spoken to Frances Watson in December, asking her to find the fraud in the state, that she would be a national hero if she did. Other media outlets reportedly picked up on the story, and they claimed that they verified the story and then ran with it. It turns out now, due to newly discovered recording released by the Georgia Secretary of State's office, the quotes attributed to Mr. Trump were in fact false. It was fake news. What was actually said to President Trump urged the investigators to scrutinize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia, asserting she would find dishonesty there. He also told her that she had the most important job in the country right now. Let's bring in John Graves. John, that's breaking. They're now going to review this in Georgia, and fake news does exist.
Yes, it does. And what's incredible is everybody talks about on the left, oh, there were 86 lawsuits on voter fraud and they dismissed every one of them. That's not true. There's less than 30 if you don't count all the appeals. And none of them got a fair day in trial. And here we are 4 months later, and we're finally getting to look at Fulton County, one city in Atlanta, Georgia, which, you know, depending on what happens there, that could literally change that electoral college count in that state. And then on top of that, we've got a false story that, you know, people believed it, went on from it. And I think voter integrity, election integrity is a massive issue going forward.
Right. It's going to be up to the states. I want to bring Attorney General Paxton back in. Sir, you're the one that there was a lot of people who were very excited and happy with you when you filed suit on behalf of the state of Texas. And then we wondered why the Supreme Court didn't pick that up. Can you give us any insight into that?
You know, it's hard to understand. The founders set it up, I think, very well. Everyone gets their day in court. A state suing a state doesn't get to go to district court, federal district court, or state district court, because the founders viewed that as unfair, suing in your own state. So they provided for the Supreme Court to hear states suing states. Everybody's supposed to have a day in court because it's supposed to keep things civil, and they didn't want us fighting each other. Well, it makes no sense to me that we didn't have standing as a state to have our case at least heard. And so I don't understand it. I don't think they're right on that. I think the founders meant for us to have that case heard. And if we'd had the opportunity, I think we had a very good chance of prevailing on the merits.
Yeah, because what happened in those states, in those cities, does affect Texas election law. Let me pivot to another one, because we were just recently freed from the mask through Governor Abbott. And some of the restrictions that were happening here in Texas has been loosened, just like in other parts of the country. And you were having some pushback from the city of Austin, and you sued Austin. Can you give us an update on that?
Well, yeah. First of all, it's not unusual for us to sue Austin. We had to sue them around New Year's when they tried to shut down restaurant and bars outside of what the governor provided. We were successful in getting that done within 48 hours. In this case, they clearly are violating what the governor issued, which is there can be no penalty for not wearing a mask in the state of Texas. Now, individual business owners can make different decisions. That's okay. Individuals can make their own decisions. But it's now up to the individual. It's up to the business owner. It is not up to the city of Austin. They cannot provide any type of penalties, which they would have to do when they require masks. And so we sued them. And I think we'll, in the end, be successful in stopping them from imposing their own restrictions.
John?
Yeah, to me, to go back to what the Attorney General Ken Paxton was saying, there were 18 states. He led as Texas, but they had original jurisdiction to bring this issue against 4: Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and I believe it was Pennsylvania. And 18 states wanted that. They never got their day in court, but it goes all the way down from the Supreme Court. I don't know if Attorney General, you could comment on this, but my understanding is you're in the middle, your office, of over 500 voter fraud investigations just in our state. Is that right?
Well, I don't know the exact number. It's changing every day, but we are involved in hundreds of voter fraud investigations. And unfortunately, we only have 3 attorneys that deal with all of these cases, and we have to spend the time to make sure that we have the right proof. So we are bringing those to court as fast as we can. We've already filed some of those, as you know, in Gregg County. The county commissioner that used mail-in ballots to win the election, and we recently had this woman on tape admitting that she was involved in voter fraud, and we're prosecuting her. So there are certainly numerous cases in Texas.
Wearing a mask. Thank you so much. It's been very fascinating. There are a lot of people that are praying for you and very excited about the actions your office have taken. You're at the point of the spear, and we thank you for it. Mike, let's pitch it back to you.
Thank you.
Greg, a new point man has been chosen when it comes to the administration's efforts to implement the American Rescue Plan. Former economic policy advisor in the Clinton and Obama administrations, Gene Sperling, will be taking the lead. According to Joe Biden, Sperling will be on the phone with mayors and governors and be a source of accountability to get the job done. And Joe Biden is visiting a small business in the Philadelphia area today as he touts the benefits of the COVID-19 rescue plan. Here is the president, leaving the White House to head up to Pennsylvania. It's part of the administration's Help is Here tour that kicked off on Monday. Vice President Kamala Harris got things underway when she stopped by a vaccination site and culinary academy in Las Vegas. The two will meet up in Georgia on Friday. Along with stimulus payments of $1,400 for many Americans, the rescue plan also has $350 billion for state, local, and tribal governments, $130 billion for K through 12 schools, and about $50 billion to expand COVID-19 testing, among other provisions. Less than 10% of the money is actually going to COVID relief. And as the situation at the border continues to worsen, during Monday's White House press briefing, Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked if Joe Biden has any plans to visit and see for himself what is really going on.
A lot of Americans who see him going to take these trips this week to promote this popular law and think, okay, but why can't he take time to go down to the border? You said last week, and you've said before, it takes a lot of resources to get him there. It's taking a lot of resources to get him to Pennsylvania and Georgia this week, the vice president out west. Why not take the time to schedule something to go there as well?
Well, I would say, Ed, that his focus is on developing solutions, pushing his team, encouraging his team to develop solutions that will expedite processing at the border, that will open more facilities, that will ensure kids are treated with humanity and also treated safely, and that's his focus. And so that's where he's putting his efforts on immigration.
Another question that came up, the decision to send FEMA to the border.
Does FEMA's arrival at the border mean that the administration feels what is happening down at the border is a disaster?
I know that we always get into the fun of labels around here, but I would say our focus is on solutions, and this is one of the steps that the president felt would help not become a final solution, but help expedite processing, help ensure that people who are coming across the border have access to health and medical care. Clearly, the numbers are enormous. This is a big challenge, and it certainly is a reflection of using every lever of the federal government to help address that.
With the Democrats in power, one of the oldest traditions of the Senate, the filibuster, may be on the chopping block, potentially ending a bipartisan government as we know it.
Today's filibuster has turned the world's most deliberative body into one of the world's most ineffectual bodies. We are like the giant in Gulliver's Travel, tied down by our own legislative red tape, unable to respond to crises and the clear wishes of the American people. Defenders of the filibuster will tell you that it's essential for American democracy. The opposite's true.
Senator Dick Durbin gave that speech on the Senate floor on Monday, urging his fellow Democrats to do away with the filibuster. Proponents say ending the filibuster would allow Senate Democrats to pass many of President Joe Biden's biggest legislative items without a single Republican vote. And after jamming through their latest partisan spending bill with a process called reconciliation, Democrats in Congress are at it again.
I think it's going to be a building process, and you see some action by some of these committees to certain parts of it, but ultimately it's going to be put together similar to how the rescue committee put together. It's got to be in the because you're most likely to have these reconciliations.
That was Senator Ben Cardin from Maryland, and that excerpt you just heard was the senator speaking with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about the plan to once again use reconciliation to punch through infrastructure legislation without Republican support. Budget reconciliation is a parliamentary procedure that allows lawmakers to sidestep Senate filibusters. All that is needed is a simple majority to pass whatever bill is inserted into a budget reconciliation package. Greg, back to you.
Wow. Seems like there's a lot of angst to get things done quickly. 2 people accused of unleashing pepper spray in the face of Capitol police officers during the January 6th Capitol riots will now face charges. Julian Crater and George Tanos are facing multiple counts, including assaulting police with a deadly weapon after investigators say they sprayed at least 3 officers with an unidentified but powerful chemical agent. One of those officers, Brian Sicknick, was later rushed to the hospital and died later that day. Crater and Tanos are not charged with killing Sicknick, whose cause of death remains unclear. Both men will be held in custody until they are arraigned at a future date. Well, the saga of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo took another strange turn. One of Cuomo's former aides and one of the 7 women to accuse the governor of sexual misconduct, Charlotte Bennett, met with New York State investigators. During the meeting, Bennett provided over 120 pages of records where she kept details of his behavior. Cuomo thus far has denied all allegations, saying in a statement that he never made advances toward Ms. Bennett, nor did I ever intend to act in any way that was inappropriate. Let me bring John Graves back in here. John, as we're listening to this Congress, they seem to be trying to rush to get things done. They have the closest of margins they've had in generations, and they want to get rid of the filibuster. Can you explain to people what the filibuster is?
Yes, a lot of people get confused with a filibuster. They think of Mr. Smith goes to Washington and think about it. You can just talk and talk and talk. Well, what the filibuster in the Senate historically has done and currently does is they can end the debate. So it's called a cloture vote. And so literally what they can do is if you can stop the opposition or the minority party, which was Democrats last cycle, right now it's Republicans, they then have to have 60 votes to move forward on some of their legislation. And so that stops the debate. So what they want to do is lower the 60 to 50-50, where they now control, and Vice President Kamala Harris would be the deciding vote. So they're trying to get it through because they don't have the votes of 60% of the people in the Senate.
I got it. Okay, I want to pitch it back to Mike Garofalo for more of today's news. Mike?
Greg, the battle against the Islamic State is continuing. Now, this time, Britain's Royal Air Force is taking action with a 5-day bombing campaign. As UPI is reporting on Monday, it took action against Islamic State forces in Iraq in support of Iraqi ground troops. Typhoon fighter planes reportedly conducted airstrikes using Storm Shadow missiles and paveway-guided bombs in northern Iraq. And defense and foreign ministers from the United States and Japan met today to discuss their shared worry over China's growing territorial ambitions in the East and South China Seas. Now, this comes as the Biden administration tries to reassure key regional allies.
We believe in democracy and human rights, the rule of law, because we've seen how our own countries are stronger because we adhere to those values, and because they are under threat in many places, including in this region. In Burma, the military is attempting to overturn the results of a democratic election and is brutally repressing peaceful protesters. And China uses coercion and aggression to systematically erode autonomy in Hong Kong, undercut democracy in Taiwan, abuse human rights in Xinjiang and Tibet, and assert maritime claims in the South China Sea that violate international law.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the Biden administration is committed to work with U.S. allies and those in the region and support their shared values of human rights and democracy as they face challenges from China and North Korea. Another amazing discovery by Israeli archaeologists. Earlier today, they revealed the unearthing of new Dead Sea Scroll fragments containing biblical text. The scrolls were found in a desert cave. I believe that they were likely hidden there by Jewish refugees during a revolt against Rome close to 1900 years ago. The fragments are said to contain Greek texts from the books of Zechariah and Nahum. Greg, back to you.
Yeah, that's amazing that the Bible keeps revealing itself. I did a little study on that. They were written in Greek, but anytime God's name was mentioned, it was written in Hebrew. Very interesting, the things they found. I want to bring John Graves back in. John, as we listen to the stories today, the open border, China's military is growing, and we've got troops and fighting again in Iraq and Syria. Did we make a good choice here? I mean, is this the right turn for us?
Yeah, you know what's fascinating to me about these stories is you've got the Como story, which is now recent 6 to 7 women with evidence. Where is the Me Too movement on this? Kavanaugh was one lady 30 years ago, and the whole world imploded because the media was behind it. You've got stories of election fraud. I mean, you could just go through the list of every one of these that were. I was making a list as we were going through them, talking about Trump's, election, and China. That's what it was, where they're repressing people that oppose the election. That's exactly what's happening in our country. We didn't get into it with the Attorney General, but he brought a lawsuit, an investigation against the top 5 social media, Google, Facebook, Twitter, a lot of the companies that were censoring and shutting down anyone who opposed to them. And then the last story was the man who everyone, starting with the New York Times, said the Trump supporters killed him by beating him on the head with a fire extinguisher. His own family has now said that no, the only thing that happened to him was there was some pepper spray, which lots of people got that day. We think he died of a stroke. And no one wants to talk about it because we're 4 months past and we're just now maybe going to get to see some real evidence of some of these lawsuits. And it's going to take that to restore the people's trust before they go into this next election.
It's so true what you just said, restore the people's trust. We hear it all the time from viewers that they hear these stories and it gets depressing to them, and we don't do this so that you will get depressed. And they say, I don't know that I want to vote. I don't know that my vote makes any difference. And we found this verse this morning, and I want to read it to you. In Exodus chapter 18, verse 21, moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place them over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, rulers of 10s. That's elections. And it tells us what kind of people they should be.
Large.
Right, and it tells us what kind of people they should be. And that's the problem. We just not elected those kind of people, right?
Yeah, that's some of it, but I love that. But part of what they're also saying is you're the ones that need to be involved in picking these leaders. And that's, if you study the history of America, it was founded on biblical principles, whether it's our civil laws, our criminal laws, our Constitution, they were all founded. In fact, the founder said it wasn't meant for an immoral people. So if you take God out of the equation, which is what the radical left is trying to do right now, then all of a sudden this country doesn't work. The good news to me and the hope for people is, I remember an older pastor saying, I was getting counsel on a very difficult situation.
Real quick.
He said, God always wins.
God always wins. All right,
millionvoices.org. Even if it takes time.
Millionvoices.org is your website.
Right.
I encourage people to go there.
Yes.
Thank you for being part of today. I also want to thank Attorney General Ken Paxton, Victory News contributor John Graves for being with us. We're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to do this again, noon Eastern time, 11 Central. And you'll find today's programs and past programs at govictory.com /Victory News. Govictory.com /Victory News. Thanks for watching. Know this, information under the anointing is a very powerful tool. That's because you can use your voice, you can use your words and pray, and God will hear you and begin to heal and change this land. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow. God bless.